I would like to introduce Mr. Shubham Saraff, founder of Application Soft-Tech, an artificial intelligence-based startup in Mumbai, the global winner of the IET Chennai, a flagship presentation competition. He has won several awards and recognition at prestigious platforms, including Cambridge University, Harvard University, and Institution of Engineering and Technology. His path-breaking research papers have been published in international journals of repute. He is an advisor to venture capital funds for evaluation of tech-enabled disruptive solutions. He is also a co-founder and chief technology architect at two other startups for customer-centric solutions and technologies to address healthcare needs.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for showing up in great numbers. It's really heartening to see that even during such challenging times, everyone's right here. I know you're at home, so we'll try not to make it boring. It'll be really interesting to be beginning with. I'll quickly share what we are going to be doing today. I hope everyone can see the screen. Couple of things. First of all, it's a pleasure joining and seeing everyone, all of you right here with discussing the issues of unraveling COVID and the emerging tech opportunities. I'd request you to just make sure that your screen's on full screen to enjoy the visuals that we'll see right now. And I'd also have a disclaimer that I didn't have the privilege of going out and clicking pictures of animals and stuff during this time of COVID. So any picture, any image that you see, the right remains with the respective owners or with Google Images. So let's stick to that. And now that we begin about the COVID-19, the coronavirus disease 2019, we all are aware that it's something that has been talked about, something that has been fed in the newspapers, in every different areas for quite some time now. And hence today I'm not going to be talking about, while it's a very distressing situation, about how the doctors are dealing with it, how the number of people getting affected is increasing by the minute. I will refrain from talking about this because this is something that's already been spoken about. I would also not talk about the protective gear. While this is a great issue at the moment, the masks, the protective PPEs, all these things are something that we've already been reading about on WhatsApp, newspapers, news channels. There is a ray of hope. There are some positive news that we have been talking about in cases of decreasing pollution or even animals coming out of the streets. So these are peacocks in my city, Mumbai, which are in some society. Dolphins, news of dolphins coming out in Venice. But these are not what we're going to be discussing, and neither are we going to discuss the impact of coronavirus on the financial market, because all these things that we've discussed right now, the doctors, the number of cases, death rates, financial markets, or even the positives such as the pollution or the animals coming out in the streets, are all the primary impact of coronavirus. Whereas in pandemics, historically, if you see, there have been lots of pandemics that the world has seen starting from BCs and ADs around the world. In fact, if you see around the 1300s, there was a pandemic called the Black Death, when the population of the earth was fractional, but it affected 200 million people. In fact, something more recent in the 1900s, the Spanish flu impacted 50 million people, even when our population was fairly small. The incidence in these pandemics or these situations was so dire that it actually changed the world. It changed the world in a scenario where if you see the pre-pandemic era versus the world right after the pandemic, you would see a stark difference. And that is what we're here to discuss today. And let's, instead of talking about this black and white era of 1920s, because you won't find a lot of correlation with how successes were measured in 1920, how people communicated in 1920. Hence, let's not discuss pandemics or situations then. Let's discuss a global phenomena much closer to us in the 2000s. Something that we all have possibly lived through. Something that we call the 9/11. When the 9/11 happened, we all know that it's something that completely shook the world. Our generation refers to certain eras as pre-9/11 and post-9/11. That's the impact 9/11 made. That's something that impacts the entire world. Now, if you compare it to a coronavirus scenario right now, you would see that there are people around the world. In fact, more than 50% of the world is currently under a lockdown. There are a lot of people who call themselves liberal and come out and say that, hey, it's unfair to be locking us down and imprisoning us in our own houses. If we're free citizens of a democratic world, it's our right to be, in the word of freedom, roaming around in the streets. Which means they're talking about the freedom of their roaming around the streets cannot be taken away by their governments. But let me remind you that the post 9/11 world took away our freedom. Took away our freedom when we wanted to travel, and nobody could say anything. Airport travel before 9/11 was similar to traveling in a train station or a bus station, which is a 25-minute job. But it changed where your freedom of you being frisked in terms of your privacy, personal privacy, your bags, your luggage, everything, spending more than about an hour and a half or two is what your privacy and your freedom was taken away. That's because the world changed. And that's where 9/11 changed the way we travel. But 9/11 impacted us in terms of security and travel. There's another incident that changed the way on a much deeper front on a lot of different sectors. And that, again, closer to us, just about a decade back, is the financial crisis of 2008. The financial crisis of 2008 was something that engulfed the world in a crisis that had not been seen possibly around a century. And that was the grave issue where stock markets crashed, where people could not believe that how could something that's stable, that something that had not crashed in so many years in such a manner, could crash in days like this. There were big banks that we thought were all and too big to fail. Books were written on it. They came to streets in days. People became homeless all over the world, and people lost their jobs. If you remember, this scenario was extremely dire, where losing of jobs, I remember people coming back to India from the United States because they lost their jobs there. Losing of jobs, being homeless, big banks failing, stock markets getting impacted, all of this is the primary reason of what and how the 2008 Great Recession impacted us. All of this is the primary reason. So people came up with solutions on how to make mortgages more safe. People came up with solutions on how to make banks more transparent and liable to issues that you do. Stock markets getting transparent. All these things were the issues that people thought. But during these times, all of these things that we just discussed are either blue, yellow, or red. That is, they're all primary in nature, all related to the financial institutions that got impacted. Very few people, a very small percentage of the entire society, looked at the secondary and the tertiary problems. The primary problem is something that everyone could see, the financial institutions. The secondary and tertiary problems are where the opportunities lie. And these few people who realize these secondary and tertiary are the ones who understand and convert these opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, think about 5 companies that you and I cannot survive without today. 5 very, very important companies. Let me list them for you. WhatsApp, Airbnb, Uber, Cloudera, Instagram. Each of these companies were conceptualized, launched, and grew in the time of the global recession of 2008, 9, or 10. Each of these companies, WhatsApp, in Airbnb, Uber, all of these. And it was not a mere coincidence, because each of these companies realized the importance of what the secondary and tertiary impact of the financial crisis was. And that's how opportunities are created. These large entities that we talk about have been created during those times. How was Airbnb created? When the mortgage issues happened around the world, specifically in the United States more so, there were two sectors of people. One, extremely rich, who had invested into houses, who had multiple houses at their disposal, who wanted to keep these houses as investments. And the second were the type of people who got so poor by the financial crisis that they could not afford to buy a house. These people who could not buy a house, could not even rent a hotel, needed cheaper places to stay if they were traveling. And the richer section of people who already had multiple houses could not afford to keep those investments in place. They needed more liquidity. That's how an opportunity was created to create an online platform of Airbnb, of matching these rich people who could offer these investment homes of theirs as rented places to stay for travel and for business. And the poor people who got poorer, who could not afford hotels, came in to stay at Airbnbs. Something very similar with the car phenomena. Two sections of people. One who were very habituated to owning a personal car, going to offices, restaurants, dinners with their families in their own cars, but they could not afford it anymore. And that's exactly why this entire scenario of selling off their cars happened. And the second section of people who owned cars, could afford the cars, but could not afford to keep them without extra liquidity. Uber again mapped this point of view. For them to be paying their EMIs by getting more income from flying their cars as taxis or Ubers, and people who wanted to be driven in chauffeur-driven cars to come and join an Uber platform. That's what the technology did here. This is the beauty of something like Uber. If you see at that time in 2008-9, they called it next generation car service. Something which was called next generation back then became a norm in 2013-14 itself. Now today you can't even think about traveling to a new country without an online aggregator of taxis like Uber or Lyft. And that was an entire new segment or a sector created out of some financial institution issues, which was not a taxi related issue, which is not a travel related issue. If you bring the same concept of what happened in 2008, 9/11 and other pandemics, that the world changed after that, to coronavirus situation of COVID-19, you would realize that we are moving towards making makeshift hospitals at enormous rates, fantastic rates. We're talking about building masks. We're talking about mass manufacturing of sanitizers. Now that we're talking about sanitizers and masks, why are we building sanitizers and masks? Because that's the primary thing that coronavirus impacts. It's a very infectious disease. Now, because you're talking about it being infectious, let's just very quickly, very briefly understand what is coronavirus. Let's unravel it on that front. People think coronavirus, and have been talking about, is that it's an infectious disease which started by eating a bat. Everyone says that. In fact, if you go to any other news channel, they are persistent on saying that somebody ate a bat. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, if somebody so much loves bat, they should know that if humans would have eaten coronavirus from a bat, coronavirus would not have been a very deadly or fatal infection. It's a myth that coronavirus in humans has started spreading because somebody ate a bat. It is because coronavirus was spread to a pangolin. The fact is, coronavirus historically has happened and induced from bats, each of it. But each of it has happened through bats, even SARS, MERS, or even COVID-19. But each of these issues of coronavirus strains have shifted to a larger animal in scenarios and then shifted to a human. If the human would have bypassed this larger animal and just consumed a coronavirus strain from a bat, it would not have been that fatal. It would have just led to a viral infection, maybe on your ear, on your eye, like the normal viral infections that you get. It's the coronavirus that shifted from this bat, which manipulated and then shifted to this pangolin, which is being speculated at the moment. And pangolin, by the way, in China is highly celebrated because the scales of pangolin is thought to be therapeutic in nature. It's healing in nature. That's why it's a very sought after animal to eat. And when humans ate this pangolin, which developed a stronger strain of this coronavirus, that's when we got this COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, which is so difficult to handle. In fact, I will not go deep into this because it's too strong a biology, but very, very briefly, I just want to say this is the biology of coronavirus, and none of these other features, not the envelope, not the membrane, not the mRNA, not the lipid bilayer envelope, is going to be the one that the vaccines or the medicines going to come on. The vaccines and medicines are only and only going to be looking towards the S protein, which is the spike protein, because that is what clings with your lungs and that is what's making it fatal. So if anyone has any questions on the biology of it, please feel free to ask right after this. But I just pass it by because there's a lot of engineers there, and I know that biology is not the first place for them to look at. But that is what coronavirus is. That's what coronavirus primarily impacts: healthcare workers, deaths, masks, sanitization, hygiene, travel. But let's try to understand what is the secondary and tertiary things. Where are the opportunities that lie today in these times of pandemic at the moment? Yes. So let's think about something which we haven't thought about. We have thought about how a patient who has coronavirus has to go to the hospital. We've thought about how milk will reach our house. We've thought about how we cannot travel, how all of these things have been thought about. So somebody will go out and make a new factory for masks. Somebody will go and make better ways to treat patients and have more better protective gears. But have you thought about that a pregnant woman who's in despair and pain at this point of time, how will she go to a gynecologist? Because clinics are closed, it's locked down. You have to head to a bigger hospital. And there's a huge fear of going to a bigger hospital because they have now become hotspots of coronavirus. What will a pregnant woman do? How will she see a gynecologist? These are issues that we need to think about in secondary and tertiary manner. How would a small infant who might not be feeling well, how will the parents go to a pediatrician? Such dire times, kids are also very, very, very vulnerable to this virus. In fact, you'd be shocked to know that infants at this hour are more susceptible to nasal congestion. And nasal congestion is one of the primary symptoms of coronavirus. But nasal congestion in infants is a normal affair. But think about those parents who see their kid getting a nasal congestion right now, and that being one of the primary symptoms of coronavirus. They can't go to a pediatrician. There are a lot of different problems that even healthcare is facing because of this primary coronavirus. Think about, let's shift to another sector altogether. India is known to be the BPO of the world. Customer care executives in India service the world. Forget the world now. Customer care executives can't service Indians because these enormous offices around the world, Gurgaon, BKC, around Hyderabad, Bangalore, are now completely empty because of the lockdown. And they can't access their terminals. They can't access their landlines that they used to call their customers or customers used to call them on. Which means in a time like a pandemic, where you need to deal with a customer care executive even more to cancel your flight ticket, to cancel your visa or understand what your visa process is, whether your delivery is happening or not with Flipkart, Amazon, all of these things, banking related issues, trading related issues, where will you call? How will these companies function? That's an opportunity. Think about the third opportunity right here. It's a major, major problem. Students who travel to different cities to study in India or outside India. Think about a student who studies in the UK, studies in New York, studies in the US. They have paid rent to stay in that particular city for a year. Now they can't go back, and the rent lease agreement is completely signed and they're paid in advance for. They are stuck in Bombay, they're stuck in India at their hometowns, and they can't go back. So they are spending their rents left, right, center, and which is not a small fee. And on the flip side, there are students who are stuck back there in those countries and want to come back home, but they can't come back because of travel embargoes. And their rent agreement is getting over. They will have no more to stay, no more places to stay because the landlord wants to give it to one of their relatives. These are issues which we haven't thought about. Think about the fourth type of issue. The biggest ever known reverse migration in our country. Migrants from different states, towns, and villages who came to work are now heading back to their villages because of the scare of coronavirus. Problem? These 100% of laborers who have gone, not 100% of them are going to be back, which means there is bound to be a shortage right after the lockdown opens up. Maybe things get normal about a 3-4 years time over the time being, but it's just about in the next 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, not 100% going to return back. So what are we going to do about that shortage of labor that we have? Think about, we're all excited that this lockdown gets over and we're going to go back to our restaurants, right? Things are going to change there as well. You would think twice before thinking about the hygiene levels of that restaurant, if it's being touched, not touched, contactless, not contactless. In fact, the same thing is going to be at hospitals. People are going to reduce going to hospitals for small things because hospitals can infect them, food can infect them. So food industry and healthcare industry has to become more hygienic. All these issues are something which cause a sort of opportunity. These are all secondary and tertiary things. These are not the primary infectious disease impacting the industry. And what can we do about it? This is only technology that can move towards this. And Benjamin Franklin said, out of adversity comes brilliant opportunity. And that's what COVID-19 poses to us. A lot of these issues, a lot of these secondary and tertiary issues, which will be picked up by a small group of people, is what's going to make new sectors like the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the WhatsApps of the world. And that's why it's an appeal to entrepreneurs, technologists, engineers to do something about it. What have certain companies done? So we at Anaha, a maternity care AI company, we have realized that these pregnant women around the world who cannot reach a gynecologist, these small infants who have this nasal congestion, who can't reach a pediatrician, can quickly come onto our platform, and we have a group of gynecologists and pediatricians readily available in multiple languages, including regional languages. And we don't charge anyone, neither the patient or the doctor, during the time of this crisis, and you can simply teleconsult. And this teleconsultation is not just a video consultation. It has the regulated, Government of India regulated e-prescription modules fed in so that you can actually take it to a pharmacy and get the medicines, because WhatsApp reports and all are not authorized for medicines at the pharmacy. Everything so that you can do it from your house and get a peace of mind from your pediatrician that your infant who has nasal congestion is not a very major concern in terms of coronavirus. A second thing, we talked about the customer care. A company called QServe took this opportunity up and realized that maybe it makes sense to let smaller companies who are not being able to attend their clients in person as a receptionist, as a salon or a restaurant, or all these things can make up their own IVRs in few minutes, which take months at the moment. IVR is a customer care calling number. They have also launched a system where you can create a customer care system which is work from home. Currently, customer care agents have to come to their office, use their terminal, use their landline to call their customers, because that's the regulation, as customers should not be able to see the agent's personal number, and it should be mapped by the universal number of the company. Plus, it should be all recorded. QServe has created a work from home customer care, which agents sitting in their own homes can use their mobile phones to call, but the customer will only see the company number, plus everything gets recorded for the manager to see. A simple solution, but something which is very required for getting the customer care teams back online very quickly. And while these are two solutions that I have been able to talk about, I still don't know the solution to possibly this rent problem of students remaining in the other countries and remaining in our own country. How do you solve that? Maybe you could create a technology platform, which I'm not aware of, but the idea could be that you could create a technology platform. The people who are in requirement of new rent agreements and people who are not being able to utilize the rent agreements can be mapped, and that could lead to a new opportunity on tech platform. I don't know what's the solution to the remigration issue, but it has to be on the lines of automation. Somebody has to very quickly create good automation tools so that these laborers, if they don't return, the downfall in the labor rates do not lead to the economy going down on that front. So a lot of industries would require automation. And the food, you will have to think about how we can create better delivery, better food development without any contact of human beings and without any contamination. And these are very few, very few sectors that we have just discussed. But the point is, it is us technologists, us engineers, who have to figure out ways on creating solutions out of these opportunities. We have to change our outlook, our perspective on how we look at COVID-19. COVID-19 for engineers is not just infection and protective gear. It is more to do with what we can build and we can create. While doctors are doing their bit to create a warm scenario and figuring out how to solve issues of the infectious disease at the front line of healthcare, it's engineers' task to figure out, and entrepreneurs' task to how to figure out and do it better and change the world in the coming few years. So that if you enter 2022, the people in 22 and 25 should be able to say that what engineers and entrepreneurs did in 2020 is what defining 2025. That's what we say for Uber, WhatsApp, Instagram, and the world around. And what's so special about engineers is that whenever humans have desired for something, engineers have come to the rescue for that. When humans wanted to fly, engineers created the aircrafts and gave humans the feeling of being able to fly. When humans from one side of the city used to see the people from on the other side and wanted to meet each other, would not want to take a longer route, engineers created the bridge. If you see how happy these people are on the street and how happy people were when they went on the Bandra Wali ceiling for the first time, it is the engineers that create such things. In fact, when humans could not travel far off because of horse carts, bullock carts, that convenience of having a vehicle which is motor driven was given by engineers, created, built by engineers. In fact, one of the greatest desires of the human being of going out of this atmosphere to moon, to Mars, and even beyond is what engineers do. So the point is that it is us engineers who have to think, innovate, re-engineer, and realize that these are the times when we have to become more resilient and more thoughtful in nature to create better solutions, which as engineers, as entrepreneurs, as technologists, this is the opportunity to change the world and let the world adopt things which would have rather taken years to adopt, now can be adopted in a snap. So ladies and gentlemen, let's re-engineer and not spread the virus and spread the good word about re-engineering. So please stay home, stay safe, and please feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to take them on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shubham, for giving us your take on the situation and for highlighting the opportunities. This kind of a positivity is much needed in these tough times. So I thank you for that.